Welcome back, everybody, to a very special episode of the Author Spotlight podcast. If you're listening on ThriveAfterSports, thank you for tuning in there as well. Folks, I'm here with a very special guest. This is a man that I've been looking to get on the podcast for quite some time. He's been very patient with me, with my schedule, and rescheduling a couple of times, but I'm glad we were able to make it work today. And I'm here with Mr. Sean J. McCaw, the author of Same Name, Different Game, Your Guide to a Successful European Rookie Season. I just finished reading this. We're going to get into the mission behind the book and some of the things you can expect once you get your hands on this, who the book is for, things of that nature. But first and foremost, Sean, thank you for joining me today, all the way from Germany, man.
All the way from Germany. But I appreciate us finally linking up and being able to do this.
Yes, man. It's a pleasure to have you here. Can you just tell people, I know people who listen to this show or listen to Dr. Sarah's podcast, or, for anyone who may have been living under a rock and hasn't heard about the mission that you're on and what you're up to, can you please just let people know a little bit about your background and who you are before we dive in and talking about the book?
Okay, to make a long story short, I was a professional basketball player here in Europe for 13 years. Then I coached for another 9 years. And now for the last 7 years, I am a teacher. So I've kind of been around the block, and I live here currently in Germany since the last 12 years, I think now. And but I played in 6 different countries as a professional, but I ended my professional career here in Germany, and then I started my coaching career here also in Germany. So that's how I ended up staying here. And I haven't regretted moving away from home, and yeah, typical expat story.
Man, 13 years is quite a professional career. I know a lot of people can only dream about having playing their sport for that long professionally. So at the end of the 13 years, how did your career kind of wind down? Did you voluntarily walk away, or what was the tail end of the career like?
Well, my journey was a little bit different than other people's journey. I technically went from player to coach in less than 3 days. So to make a long story short, my team wasn't very good, and I had planned on becoming an assistant on the same team where I was playing. That was going to be my last year for sure of playing. And although we were pretty bad, they didn't have enough money to replace the coach financially. So they asked me if I would do it. At first I said no. Then after about 2 weeks, they convinced me to do it. So I went from playing with these guys for the last 2 years to now coaching them. And that's how my coaching journey got started. I always wanted to coach. I always knew I wanted to coach, but being under those kind of circumstances wasn't what I was looking for. But eventually, it was the right decision for my journey.
Wow. And then, so you ended up, did you say 9 years? You were coaching for 9 years before you went into teaching? Yeah. So I want to go back a second, because you said that you went from playing with those guys, and in the span of 3 days or 2 weeks is when you really started coaching.
Right.
What was that like, to go from playing alongside them to coaching them? What was the dynamics like at that point?
Man, it was rough, man. It was, you gotta imagine, I was a player my whole life, and I had absolutely zero coaching experience. So of course, after playing on the same team for 2 years, I knew everybody, I knew the situation, I knew the players. I had partied with these guys. I had done a lot of crazy stuff with these guys. And then from Saturday, playing my last game as a professional on a Saturday, and then Monday morning, I've got these guys in front of me blowing a whistle and telling them to run sprints. Not the easiest transition, but the guys were really good, and they made it work, and I had a lot of respect. I was 34 at the time, so I think I was one of the oldest on the team. So from that side, I had a lot of respect, and everyone knew that I wanted to coach. So we made it work. We weren't that great, and we did our best, but in the end, if I had to do it all over again, I would do it definitely all over again, because it was my way.
Yeah, I think that speaks volumes. The fact that they thought highly of you, number one, to be like, no, we want you to actually coach, not just be an assistant coach, and for you to just kind of jump in right away. And then I think, like you said, you partied with those guys, you played with them, and for them to immediately, for you to just have their respect, I think that speaks volumes to the type of man you are, and also the type of teammate you are. So
yeah,
that's awesome. It's kind of like a Ted Lasso situation. I don't know. Have you watched
Yeah,
Ted Lasso?
I've heard. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't watch a whole lot of TV, but that was a show that was recommended to me, and there's just so many similarities. And you're
Right,
like many of the characters on that show, where you go from playing, you're
right away.
hesitating, right away coaching. That's awesome. And during this time where you were making the transition into coaching, I mean, you're staying around the game. Technically, you never left the same court that you were playing
No.
on. But how were you feeling at the time about like no longer competing yourself, even though you were coaching? What was it like no longer being on the court during that time?
Well, anyone that knows me knows that I am extremely competitive. It doesn't matter if it's checkers, Monopoly, basketball. I'm an extremely competitive person. So the fact that I went into coaching directly from playing helped my transition as far as the competition goes because it was different. It was a little bit um, actually I would say the competition level as a coach is harder or more intense as a coach than it actually is as a player because as a coach you don't have so much in your hands. You do a lot of preparation work. You try to get everything right, get the guys right, get the tactics right. But once the game starts, you have very little control over the outcome of the game. So in that sense, it's even more competitive for an individual who's a coach. So for me, it satisfied my competition drive to still be coaching, and it wasn't a problem for me. The problem came after I stopped coaching and went into teaching, because then I was missing competition. I wasn't missing the day to day stuff, but I was missing the competition, and I still do.
Mm. Yeah, I think maybe that never goes away. I don't think it ever goes away. That
No,
competitiveness, you just
no,
find different vehicles to apply it to, you know.
exactly.
And so 9 years of coaching, were you with this same team for that entire nine
No,
years?
no.
Okay.
I finished that season. I played the half of the season and then half the season I coached. And then I stayed one more year as head coach. And then I left and then I went to youth basketball because I figured I needed a little bit more seasoning. I needed a little bit more experience. So I went down to youth basketball, which is highly competitive here in Germany. And that's where I stayed for the next 3 years. Then I went back into the pro ranks, and then I came back to the youth after that, and then I was 3 more years here where I live now, and that was it. Yeah.
Is there anything in particular that had you decide to step away from coaching?
Really, it was more the right opportunity because I was starting to get a little bit burned out from coaching because coaching is very, very difficult. It's very, very taxing. It's very, very uh, yeah, grueling, the grind. And you have to think I've been playing basketball my whole life. And then I went right into coaching. I had no break. So I was starting to get a little bit burned out with traveling and recruiting and everything that goes with it. So it came a point where I had to make a decision if I would stop coaching or I would move to another city. And I got the teaching job at the exactly the right time, and it kind of made my decision easy. There was an easy transition. I didn't have to move. My family could stay where we were, and so it was just a perfect time to stop coaching.
Hmm. Okay, that makes sense. And then what? Because you did you immediately go in from coaching to teaching, or like what was that
Yes,
transition to teaching like?
yes. There was about a month that I had between my last coaching job or the last coaching responsibility that I had to do and when school started for me to start there at the school where I'm at. I'm at a private international school, so it's English spoken. And the transition was pretty easy because of course, I mean, I'm fluent in German, but of course my mother tongue is English. So I didn't have to worry about doing something in a foreign language, although I'm fluent in German. So I'm a teacher guy. That's why I was wanted to coach. So it fit me well, and it was the right time, the perfect opportunity for me, and so it wasn't hard to transition. It was only the realization that I had so much free time that that I wasn't used to. But yeah, so that was for me a easy transition. I was lucky.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the parallels between coaching, teaching is very similar. Um, I mean, how did you make the decision though? It just seems like, no, I don't mean to like. It seems like it was very easy for you along the way to just be like, oh, I'm going to do this now. Was there, because you could have done anything from coaching, you decided to go into teaching. What was that like?
Well, for me, it was pretty easy. I was extremely lucky. I have to say that I've been extremely lucky my whole time being overseas. I don't have the horror stories that some guys have, not getting paid on time, this, that, and the other. I had it pretty easy. I must admit that. And then the transition into teaching was one where either I would continue coaching and move away from my family because I wanted them to stay here. I was tired of moving around, the kids in school, things like that. So it was like, okay, um, either I have to go away to keep coaching, or I look for something close by to give up the coaching thing. But it of course has to fit. And I got an interview for the teaching job, and it worked, and it was pretty seamless.
That's awesome. That's great. It's nice to hear a story of someone who had a smooth transition, even a smooth
Mhm.
playing career for a
Yeah,
change. With, as you know, like you said, there's a lot of horror stories out there, especially when it
yeah,
comes to overseas basketball.
yeah.
So, with you having a smooth career and never having any issues from one stage to the next, what is it that had you decide to become an author to kind of share your experience and help other players who are going to be coming overseas with their experience?
Well, I've actually written a book 20 years ago, 19 years ago, and I never got it published. I was still playing at the time, and I knew I wanted to give back. I wanted to give knowledge that I had gained as a professional to those who were coming after me so that they didn't make some of the same mistakes I've seen from other people, or also mistakes that I've made myself, or I've experienced with friends, or things like that. So I wanted to kind of give back. When I first came out of school, no one was there to guide me. And that's what I wanted to do with the book. So I started writing it back then, and I tried to get it published. And back then there was no publishing or self-publishing. So, or at least it wasn't a thing as it is now. And so I never got it published. So I would literally just copy it and give it to guys and girls that I knew that needed that kind of information, what I had in the book, to help guide them through, especially their first season overseas. So then 2020 hits, and I had a little bit more time in my hands because schools were closed, things like that. And I revisited the book and made some adjustments and said, okay, let's try it through self-publishing, and that's the route that I chose, and it worked out. And I'm pretty pleased with the result. I'm pretty pleased with the feedback that I've gotten from those who have read the book or bought the book or got it per gift or whatever. But my main thing is I'm not in it for the money. You know, just like I know, people don't get rich off of books unless they're bestsellers. My thing is just to be able to give back and to help those who are coming up behind me, because I realize that there's so many women and men that don't have an idea how to navigate the waters of European basketball. And for me, that's the most important thing, is to let someone have something in their hands where they can look at it and say, okay, this guy went through it. He's explaining it. Okay, I know exactly what's going to happen if I get fired. I know what happens if I get hurt. And those are really key points that I wanted to give back.
That's so cool, Sean. The fact that you had been working, or you wrote the book, you already had this material 20 years ago. Because I
Right,
say that because I remember you and I connected probably around this time last year when we did the
right,
book
yeah,
swap and everything.
right.
And you were we had a few conversations. You're telling me, hey, I'm working on this book, and we were just chopping it up a little bit. I just thought you had just started writing it. I didn't realize it was written 20 years prior. And I think it's awesome that
Well, I
even though,
did improve it.
oh, well, yeah, for sure. You can, yeah, I'm sure you definitely enhanced it and everything. And obviously, through those 20 years, you had a lot more to add to it, especially through the coaching experience and everything, too. But my point is, I think it's so cool that okay, it wasn't officially published, but you're keeping this log or this material you've put together. And even though it wasn't an officially published book, which would have probably stopped most people from sharing it, in your case, you're like, no, I have this material. It can help somebody. I'm gonna share it with people
Right.
right now.
Right. I think it's all about the information and having it out there. You know, it's not, my story is my story, but anyone can learn from it, you know? And I think it's important these days, especially with the new age of internet, that information is readily available. And I have a very good life here in Germany. I have a good job. My life is not dependent on the selling of this book. So for me, I've for sure given away more copies than I've sold, or maybe somewhere around the same. But I have actually no real idea how many books I've sold, because I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in getting the information out there, and eventually, maybe one day I'll break even on my investment of the book. But even then, it's not so important to me.
Yeah. Are there people who have reached out to you maybe back in the day that you know, before it was officially published and you gave them information? And are there people who have seen you actually officially publish the book and gotten copies of it? Have you heard any feedback from those people?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. Some of the guys that I gave the book as a I don't know, just a stapled copy, you know, they've actually bought the book now that it's published, and that's always nice to see that they remember, and that they've come back to me and say, hey, thank you for giving me this book 10 years ago. To say thanks, I'm going to buy 2 copies of your book, you know, like, and that's like the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, I could imagine that must be so cool. Not only, of course, for you and them as well, but just like to have gotten that material from you 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and to see it
Right.
in this published form, that has to be like phenomenal, just amazing for these people to see. That's awesome, Sean. I wanted to ask you too, because and I'm bringing this up because you know what I do on the transition side of things, and I
Yes.
work predominantly with players who are coming out of college. Maybe some of them
Mm-hmm.
had short professional careers, um, but I've heard the horror stories in a sense of some of the, like you said, people going into like almost any. I can't think of one aside from yourself who was uh, who played overseas basketball specifically, and didn't come back with some sort of not necessarily horror story, but was just kind of shocked, whether it was culture shock or you know
Yeah.
how the environment is, or just things they didn't know. And I love the fact that you're covering these topics, and it really is a roadmap. So I'm reading it, you know, and I'm looking like, man, this is something that um, you know, I want to start giving to people and reaching out to people. Even if I talk to college players and they're thinking about going overseas, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna send you a copy of this book. You got to check this out. This has everything you need to
Mm.
know. The finished product. I know you said you were working on this 20 years ago. What did you? I mean, it's probably you could probably talk for hours about this, but from the time you started writing the notes up until now, um, what sort of things have been added along the way?
That's the interesting thing. The main core of what I wrote 20 years ago pretty much was the same. Um, Contracts are almost exactly the same. Agents, dealing with agents is pretty much the same. How you should handle yourself over here is the same. Tax information, things like that have pretty much stayed constant. There were some adjustments that I had to make, but they were minor. I had to do cosmetic things with the book and do some more interviews and things like that. But that was the interesting thing, that when I revisited it, that I realized that a lot of the information does not get outdated, and which is why I think this book can be around for a long time, because there's always new college seniors that are looking to come overseas. There's always a junior that's going to become a senior that's not good enough to make the NBA, or for whatever reason doesn't make it in the NBA, and they might turn their heads towards European basketball. So from that side, most of the information in here just doesn't get outdated, and the themes are the same. Being homesick, what to do when you're injured, like I said before, or you're fired, or contract negotiations if a team would like to keep you for more than 1 year. Things like that are pretty much the same these whole last 20 years.
Yeah, you know, that's one of my favorite parts of it is, let me just skip to this real quick because I love that at the end of it. This was near and dear to my heart, obviously, with the work I do with transition. At the end of it, the last chapter is literally the end of the season and returning home. And I love that you covered this because you've covered going into the career, things to expect and look out for and be prepared for during your career. And then, of course, as we all know, one day you have to hang your jersey up. And I love that you went into that realm of it. That was like, yes, Sean is speaking my language right now by talking about this is what you need to be prepared for when it's all said and done. So I appreciated that a lot. And I just want to take a quick pause for anybody. If you're listening to this, watching the recording, watching the video, listening on the podcast, if you know an athlete who is playing basketball right now, it doesn't matter if they're kids, like the earlier you can get this book into kids' hands, the better. But especially if they're right around that college age and they're looking at playing professionally, whether that's in the NBA or the European League or anywhere overseas, I just want to quickly read some of these topics, okay? Like, just so you understand what's covered in this book. The Last Dance, you'll have to read the book. I'm not going to give that away because you'll have to read the book to understand what that means, okay? But choosing an agent, standard agent, player contracts, standard European contracts. There's a part 1, and then there's a standard European contracts part 2. Okay,
those are 2 very important chapters.
Yes, indeed, and that's what I'm saying. That's why I want people to really check this out and give it to a friend. Like, if you're the parent, the coach of an athlete who could benefit from this information, make sure you check out this book because, I mean, Sean's already been through it. Sean was writing this information down 20 years ago. Decision making, European arrival. I enjoyed that chapter because it just talked about your personal experience of, you're in a new environment. You can feel like a fish out of water sometimes.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that? The preseason, the European lifestyle, money management, and networking. Okay. Then we go into the season. And then, like I said, then there's the end of the season and returning home. So from A to Z, the entire journey is covered in this book. It's a phenomenal read. Right. It's not 2,000 pages. Sean is not putting a bunch of fluff in here. It's straight to the point. This is what you need to know. And this is what's going to help you get through. So, like I said, I've been referring it to a lot of people who I connect with, even people who are already, there's a guy I'm working with right now. He's a former, he actually played in I can't think of the country right now. He played in Greece. He played in Greece for a little bit. And so he's at the point back home where he's trying to start his career. And I actually sent him a copy of your book. And I was like, of course, just read through it so you can kind of see if there's any great material for you, but specifically just read the last chapter. So I'm working with him, but he also is reading your last chapter right now to understand, like, how do I adjust my mindset and
right.
this new lens. So what's next, Sean? Are you thinking about writing more books or, what's next on the agenda for you?
I'm brainstorming right now. I'm definitely going to write a second book. The question is, I'm going to write the third one that I have in my mind. And I'm also thinking this will interest you. I'm also thinking about writing the same type of book that I wrote for the basketball, but for football, because I'm very close to a former football player here in Germany. And we were talking about my book and he was like, hey man, a lot of this stuff translates over to football. So we're brainstorming right now, and I'm thinking about it. I'm still not sure, but I'm thinking about bringing the same type of book for guys who are coming from America overseas to play American football, as they call it here, and how the stories correlate to also from basketball.
That's awesome. So did you say that's book number 2 or number 3?
That would be number 4.
Oh, number 4. Oh my goodness.
I've got a couple of ideas for books. So I'm right now I gotta focus a little bit and figure out which one I want to bring out first. But the second book is actually in the works, and I've done a lot of interviews for it, but I just haven't finished the writing part of it. So the second one is probably going to be out in about a year, I would say.
That's awesome. Okay. We could talk about this offline without recording, but maybe even doing some kind of collaboration project would be cool. Right. Like having different stories, and that's something we specialize in at Self-Publishing 30 Days is those collaboration projects. I got my athlete to entrepreneur in the background. So
I see him back there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But yeah, that's awesome, Sean. Like I said, please tell people before we wrap up, start to close out a little bit, where can people get the book if they want to get in touch with you and ask questions or just kind of follow your journey? Side note, Sean puts out some great content on social media, all things related to not just this book, but just in general, that information that athletes need to know. So how can people follow you on social media, get the book, and all of the above?
Yeah, well, the book is on my webpage, seanjmccaw.com. You can buy it there. And if you buy it there, then I'll send you a personalized dedication inside the book and a bookmark as well. If you want it quicker, because I send everything personally from Germany, so going to the States, it might take 2 weeks or so. If you would like it quicker, you can get it on Amazon.com. And then you can always reach out to me on Instagram. I'm very, very readily available for answering questions on through Instagram, or we can exchange numbers and give a quick call or something like that. So that's what I'm enjoying right now, the interaction with people who reach out to me on Instagram and ask questions and have things that they're concerned about. So that's really what I'm really into right now. And so either on Instagram or on Amazon or on my website, seanjmccaw.com. Those are the ways to get in touch with me.
Awesome. And we will have all of that linked in the show notes. So just go ahead and check the show notes and click to go to the website and follow Sean on social media. 2 more quick questions for you, Sean.
Gotcha.
I definitely want people to get the book so they can leverage your expertise and 20 years plus of expertise, so they don't have to go through it firsthand. But if you could give advice, this may be difficult, but just like one piece of advice you could share to an athlete who's getting ready to go to Europe and getting ready to start their career, what would you share with that person right now?
I think the main thing that I would tell anybody that's about to make the journey, whether it's football, soccer, baseball, basketball, it doesn't matter. If you're about to make the journey overseas, you have to realize that overseas, Europe in general, they have different styles. They have different cultures. They have a lot of different things that are going on compared to America. You're going to have to be flexible and be able to adapt to what you're going to experience here. It's not going to be the other way around. Don't think that you're coming over here and everything is going to be like it was back home in America. It's not. So I think the reason why I was able to stay here so long and why I had a measurable amount of success was because I was able to adapt and not think that everything is like it was back home. So I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice I can give anyone who's thinking about coming and living in Europe, period, whether it be playing sports or just as an expat to live. Be ready for adjustments.
That's so powerful, Sean. And I love that because that applies to the people who are listening on Thrive After Sports right now. That same going into your career is the same way you come out of it. And you touched on that in the book. That adaptability, the world is not going to adapt to you just because you're an athlete or you were an athlete and you're done playing. You're going to have to learn how to be adaptable and make the adjustments to put yourself in a great position. And I think you did a great job of outlining that in the book.
Thank you.
That was strong advice right there. And so last question for you, and you already alluded to it earlier, but can't hurt to ask again. When you think about the legacy that you want to leave behind, I know don't get me wrong, I know you got years and years left on this planet, but when it's all
I'm not that old. I'm not that old.
I'm not trying to put that on you at all. But when you think about the legacy of Sean J. McCaw, what do you want people to say about you?
I would say that people recognize that I was a good person, that I tried to give back, that I was a good father, a good husband, all of those things. I would hope that people genuinely liked me as a person and felt that I also liked them, or we had a connection in some way, shape, or form, whether it was virtually or in person. Of course, these days I'm meeting a lot of people virtually that I've never had the opportunity like yourself to meet in person. But I'm sure that when you and I ever meet in person, it'll be like we knew each other our whole lives. So that would be the thing that I would hope that people remember me, that I wasn't just an athlete, that I was also someone who tried to give back.
Love it. Well, I think you've already accomplished that. So that's the great part about it. And you got more books coming out and more projects you're going to be working on. So that legacy is only going to be solidified even more. So that's awesome. Well, Sean, man, I want to thank you for coming on and spending some time today. I know people are going to get a lot out of this, and I know people are going to go
I hope
grab the
so.
book. Folks, I'm not on here giving book recommendations all the time. Just because, I work with the publishing company doesn't mean I think you should read everybody's book, but you should read this one. I'm putting my personal stamp on this one. So make sure you go grab a copy. And I want to thank Sean, man. I want to thank you for your time today. And I want to thank everybody who's listening on Author Spotlight and Thrive After Sports. This has been another great episode with Sean J. McCaw, the author of Same Name, Different Game, Your Guide to a Successful European Rookie Season. And we will see you on the very next episode. Thank you again, Sean.
Thank you.